do you build a sustainable brand based on your unique story? This is the Leaders of Transformation podcast. And on this show, we interview difference makers and world changers who are disrupting for good. I'm your host, Nicole Jansen. Thanks for tuning in. Our guest today is Bryan Wish. Bryan is the founder of ArcBound, which is a full service personal branding platform. They develop and position thought leaders to achieve maximum impact. And today we're going to talk about personal branding, how to discover your ARC story, establish your value proposition, and really launch your message out there into the world. And we're also going to be talking about the publishing industry and what ArcBound is doing differently to position thought leaders going forward into the future. And so we're really excited to have him here. Bryan, welcome to the Leaders of Transformation.
Nicole, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure learning from you, learning from guests on your show, and just watching you do your thing in the world. So excited to dive in.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So, talk about why this is your passion right now. And really, I'd love to go back to even like your defining moment because you shared that with me, like your story, your own story, and what caused you to get to that point where you knew this is what you wanted to do with your life.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for the question. I mean, it's very layered, so I'll do my best here to keep it concise. Nicole, I I would say this what I'm doing today is a culmination of everything in my life under one roof, connected together in a very aligned fashion. And I've never felt better about what I'm doing and how I'm showing up in the world. But to get there, right? I think, as you know, as transformation or evolution, it takes a lot of, I think, going through pain and different moments and questioning and reckoning about who you are and what you want for yourself. I think for me, I had a lot of gifts growing up. One of those was, I think, seeing a divorce at a young age, right? Like I saw money probably separate a family. I saw, you know, just how I wanted to be different as a maybe I had a stepfather who was quite abusive. I had and I would say another gift. And I mean, had these like harder moments, I would say, growing up. Not that I was like struggling and all these things, but I just saw how maybe I didn't want my life to be or how I wanted it to be different. And so I think I started asking a lot of the bigger life questions going into college around, okay, how do I develop meaning and purpose in my life? And not only that, how do I make money? How do I do something aligned that I could wake up every day and truly build a life around that was super special and fruitful? And then eventually have the family and eventually do all those things. And it was pretty black and white then and functional. But like I think I've always known what I wanted based on the things I knew I didn't want. And so I think the gifts of seeing certain things growing up, I had a lot of context to how I wanted to show up. So with that, you know, I got my start, you know, in marketing and really thinking about communities and expression of voices. Writing has always been really meaningful to me, self-discovery, and building relationships aligned to where I wanted to go, and like finding my own path and intentionally going about creating that path for myself. I think everything for me, as you talked about in the first question, like it came to a head in 2017. I was working with a author in Washington, D.C., tech entrepreneur, and he was selling his company and going through a divorce and launching his book all at the same time. And he said, Bryan, why don't you come run my book launch? And I said, sure. I was in a great place to transition and ready for the next growth phase. And I saw PR and personal branding and publishing and thought leadership really all converging under one roof. I saw the business model of what it took to pay the subcontractors, me to manage the project, me to manage the vision. And I said, this isn't a sustainable business model. And while I had an incredible opportunity that I felt was very unique, the individual I was working for wasn't really unique in the sense of his own problems. These problems were what I felt were tens of thousands of people deep, but the way we were solving them was very inefficient and disconnected. And so after a lot of the success on that book launch, things Alan Gannett is a creative curve. I wanted to create, this was all part of me, again, finding my own path and my own arc. I wanted to create a way for other leaders to be able to have their expression out there, to build those relationships in a meaningful way, to find that arc meant for them, and have a brand, and do it in a way that was sustainable, ROI driven, that connected all the pieces for a fraction of the cost, yet be extremely valuable, right, to their end goals and pursuits. And so that was a big light bulb moment for me in 2017 when I got done with that project, to say, what would a life look like if I could put all this together, which was a mixture of all my passions, interests, visions, on a much deeper scale.
Well, it's interesting because as I listen to you, and I think about like there's how many people can relate to having a lot of different things that they want to be able to do, and they don't know how those things can fit together. And you seem to get this convergence of that. Talk a little bit about that because I bet you probably have a lot of thought leaders that come to you with a lot of ideas and visionaries, right?
Yeah.
It's like we could do this, we could do that.
Right.
And how do you help them to focus
Yeah.
on what their real message is, what their real, even the business that they're in, and the story that is to put forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm going to answer this in an abstract way, if that's okay, because I think that's what's
Go for
called.
it.
I think there's no difference between an athlete who's the best in the world, who's trying to win a gold medal. There's no difference between him and the entrepreneur who wants to build the next Amazon. The entrepreneur's goals are over maybe decades, right? The athlete's goal is over 4 years, 4 year sprints. So, peak performers or athletes, right? And I learned this working with a performance coach in high school. And I brought a lot of those principles into the business to so I'm going to come to your question, but you break things down, right? You have the gold medal here, you have your physical performance here, you have your technical performance, you have your kind of social, your rest, your, all these like buckets. And you have set of skills and performance kind of measurements within those buckets and review around that. And that enables a lot of consistency. It tracks data, you have progress over time. So, 4 years out, you're doing the things from a data-driven perspective, functionally in a way, right? It's because it's so rigorous and intense that enables you to peak at the right time. And that type of training for me in high school and even into college in some ways was extremely formative. And then when I graduated college, I kind of took that to my life and was like, okay, financially, relationally, personally, professionally, what does that look like? Right. And I was building these kind of functional fortresses, and that's a whole nother story around like protecting pain. But at the same time, I brought that kind of thinking into the business, right? You said, okay, all these leaders come to you with a vision, their own version of their own gold medal. Well, how do you do it? And what I systematically thought about 4 years ago after Alan was like, okay, what are all the pieces of what I just did? And how do I break them down into different functions? Well, you need the brand and you need to figure out the message. So there's a whole process for that. You need the strategy, right? Because in this world we're in, like you have to go to strategy over here to get that and bring that in internally elsewhere. That was disconnected. So it's like, okay, these are the main pieces. Well, then, okay, if you're going to build a community, well, community needs content. You need to understand how to work with these platforms, build your own platform, build your own email list, a video, do all these podcasts, writing. Like, what are all the pieces and like, what are all the individual functions? How do you grow those over time? Okay, and then you need probably some PR to sprinkle in, because if you have momentum with your kind of content base, your community, well, let's like throw some fire on top of that. Maybe it's time to write the book is the next step. Well, instead of having to go find a book agent or go pay a firm 100 some K to launch a book, like there's probably a better way to do that. So why don't we bring that in house? And okay, like what about a website or a podcast? And like how do we build all these functional pieces in a way that enables a machine? So when someone comes to us who's top of their space, has won the gold medals in some ways, or has been the CEO or the all-star athlete, and they say, I want to have a voice and a message and impact, we have a process and a plan that enables that leader to operationalize that voice in a way that can be extremely meaningful to their community, and not just be a one-hit wonder, but have sustainable excellence over time. And so that's how I'd answer that question of, yeah, everyone comes to us with lofty visions, and we have our own lofty visions, but when we know how to break it down kind of piece by piece and systematize across all areas, and then kind of let fluidity and intuition kind of take us where it's supposed to, I think you can really wind up and build a very scalable operation, for your life in whatever direction you want to go. I just took all that and applied it to this business.
So you mentioned very briefly in about pain and avoiding pain. Have you ever had somebody come to you that had all these big plans and maybe, yeah, they're successful and all that, but you knew there was something blocking them from actually going. So it's like, yeah, I got one foot on the gas pedal and I got one foot on the brake pedal basically. And I don't want to admit it, but there's something there that I need to deal with.
So I probably shouldn't say this live. So
You don't
it's
have to
gonna
use
probably,
names.
no, well, again, I probably still shouldn't say it, but I'm going to say it because like I remember this vividly. Part of this work is on an unearthing of self in a way. Like you really got to dig deep and like answer some tough questions if you're going to like really develop a message.
Yeah.
And it takes some inner work. Like it takes definitely some inner work, and that can be. It depends on the depth of the person for them to like share and be vulnerable on certain things. And there was a client who we had, and there's a series of conversations where I just realized that um I'll never forget. I remember emailing somebody saying, I think this person is going to go through a divorce. And um I just knew. Like I just, it was such a deep sense of knowing. And anyways, we went down the journey with this person and like started standing things up, and life got in the way. Personal matters took place. And I think part of this journey of like discovering yourself and understanding yourself and knowing yourself enables you to have a message. And that's part of our job, to help uncover and unearth for people. But there also has to be like an emotional readiness to this journey, I think, to do it well and do it authentically and do it bravely, on top of sharing, the authority and like the experience that like makes people like say, oh, this person knows what they're doing. There's also an emotional side to like, I think, actually doing this well. And so whether you're 40 or 20 or 50, like, if not that you're ever fully cleansed or whole or all these pieces, but if you haven't maybe ever taken a look down memory lane, this may open you up in ways that you weren't expecting, and reveal things about yourself that you didn't know you needed to do, or transformations you may need to make in your own life that may inhibit you from maybe going forward on this journey until you really reconcile with what that is that's holding you up, which in turn, right, it will make that journey stronger. And usually we meet people at the other end of that spectrum where they've probably gone through that kind of arc, that hero's journey, and they're like ready to go make an impact, whether they're business leaders, they're consultants, coaches, investors, whatever. They have something deeper they want to unearth and share with the world because they know they can help a lot of people. So that's a really insightful question. But yeah, that happened, and it was pretty wild to me. I was not surprised either.
Yeah, well, and you said it, that in order for you to do it really well, you kind of got to go there to get the story. We're talking about your unique value proposition, your message, you're putting it out there. And I find sometimes that people want to, and even myself at one point, it's like, my mom was private, my dad not so much, private in certain ways and very expressive in other ways. But there were certain things you just didn't share, you didn't talk about, you just kind of put them away and just, it's fine, right? No, I don't want to talk about that. And I at one point, even for myself, didn't want to talk about those challenges. And it inhibited me from truly connecting to people because people thought, well, your life's perfect, everything's great, and so forth. And it's very surface. And even if they don't know that there's something missing, they know that there's something that is maybe just off a little bit. And it's too empty, it's too hollow, and there's a deeper story. And it's so cool. And I'm sure you can attest to this too. It's so cool when you get to that point and they articulate and it's like, there it is. That's it. And you see that coming out of them. It's really
Yeah.
powerful. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like your facial expression changes. You feel different in your stomach, like for sure. Your shoulders feel lighter. Um, but I think so many. I'd be curious. I mean, in the work you do, like, how many people come to you and don't really know what they need?
A lot of them. A lot of them. They say they want this. And it's like, okay, in order to get this, we've got to start here. I want to
Right.
grow my business. I want to achieve whatever the level of success is. Okay, let's start here. No, 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 you don't understand. I want to do this. Yes, I do understand. and we got to start here. So talk
Yeah.
about that from your journey of that arc story, and how you even like, how do you, okay, so I'm 50 years old, I'm going to be 51 next month. You know, there's a lot of life experience there too, to be fair. A lot of people have going like, man, I got a lot of stuff that I've been through. How do I even find and identify, not find, but how do I identify those key elements to actually share that are relevant without having this story be enormously long and a big sob story or whatever the case is?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, look, it just brings back to you for a minute. Like, you have a show on transformation to a degree. You're doing work that's transformational with leaders. I'm sure as you've built this journey off of your own life experiences, and you're doing work that's aligned to you. And there's probably, if we were to really turn this around, this conversation, there's probably some pretty clear threads, highs and lows through your life that have brought you to this point in time.
Yes.
So I think with anybody, right, there's going to be some clear consistencies in who they are, what they're up to, what they're doing, why they've done the things they've done, like experiences that have hit them out of left field they weren't expecting, that have completely changed how they've navigated life, or they've shown up and had behaviors and decisions that they've had. Yet they've never taken the time to kind of look back and make sense of it all. Yet when they do that, right, you can pull out a pretty clear understanding for why they are where they are today and where they probably need to go in the future, right? And a brand is it evolves as a human evolves, or a human evolves as a brand evolves, but it usually takes a human kind of doing that work first to understand the directionally or the arc that it needs to go down, right? And so we're shaping those arcs based on those stories of the messages that people care about, and building the products and services around that, ideally, so it's sustainable. So like when someone says, okay, I have this body of 50 some years of experience, by the way, you don't look a day over 40, so it's
Oh, very,
you
yeah, I'll
know
pay you afterwards.
great, thank you. Yeah, $0 is good. No, like you show up with 50 years old and you're like, yeah, I've done so much, and it's like, where do I start? I mean, it's overwhelming. And sometimes you need a mirror, you need people with the skills, you need process, there's frameworks, you need to kind of pull out what's there to help people say, oh yeah, that's why this message makes sense. And oh yeah, through my own story, I can go help other people, and then I can go build a brand around that. Right. And I think that's where a lot of beauty is, and that enables maybe all those functional pieces of building a brand um, actually worthwhile. But I think it needs to start, right, like you said, at the inside first.
Yeah. Now you took a spiritual journey yourself. Tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I talked about like this dysfunction, right, of like there's a protection layer, I think, and it was like running from the past that I never like truly faced. And so like working with a performance person on my life, not just sports in college, was like, how do I mimic highs and lows? Like to like be more consistent. And it was like wrapping performance tissue around like wounds. Um, and like that got me pretty far. I mean, like in retrospect, like 3 or 4 years, I was able to be really like stable and just live. And I thought that was really good. I didn't like feel a lot. Like I've always been super emotionally driven, but like I wasn't maybe emotionally expressed how I could have been. I was dating someone who was a very meaningful person in my life, and it was the first time like I saw a family. I was like, oh my God, this family is so special. I like her father was, I mean, still is, but like mensch and a half, like just such a great person. I was like, this is like everything. This is it. Um, and look, like that relationship ended, right? Like I mean, I had my own faults, so it wasn't meant to be. And like really grateful for that experience, but it was that really, I think, like cracked me open, because I was living so rigidly on this tightrope and GPS of like, got the business going. Now I got the partner. I'm going to go do family and blah, blah. And it was like, I got it all. And then like, what they say, man plans and God laughs, or whatever. That was my moment. And I think it was the first time in my life where I couldn't really run anymore. I think I was like stopped in my tracks. Like all the band-aid or tissue I was like wrapping around myself, or processes or systems, uh, uh, all were kind of dismantled, right, and shattered. And I was swimming laps after that, and I was still in DC at the time, and halfway through a lap, I'll never forget, I was going, this way, and something in my head just like was like, go to Denver. It's like, just go to Denver. Or at the time it was Boulder. I ended up going to Denver because it was a little more central to things. But I got out of the pool and it was like kind of shook me like to my core. And like 2, 3 weeks, it was just there. You look in the mirror, it's in your body, like you just want to leave. So I was like, all right, like I'm gonna trust the call, take the call, so to speak, and sold everything, left in July of 2021. I went out to Denver for the summer and had no idea where I was going to go next, but knew I needed to like kind of face myself personally for the first time. Um, because I'd been building the business. I was trying to stay healthy. I had the part, I'd been doing functionally the right things, but emotionally I wasn't really right with myself. And so I got really lucky though. I mean, the spiritual journey just wasn't me reading books and writing, which I did do a lot of, or spending time in nature and doing a lot of healing, which I did for, over a year. Um, pretty much alone. But someone showed up in my life named Rich Keller, who was kind of this Sherpa on this journey at 55, and he went through cancer, and his wife had been through cancer and been in therapy for 10 some years. And like, he left his own biological family growing up and a lot of trauma, and like, he like just showed up. And over the course of this period, I mean, I was on Zoom with him 3, 4 nights a week after work for probably an hour or 2 hours, like just going through all my like shit. And like, I literally have a document on my computer that's probably 90 pages. I still add to it. Like, we don't do it as 3 nights a week, but I talk to him at probably once a week still. Um, and just like getting super clear on my past and my triggers and my like why I showed up the way I was, and just like really started living a lot more open-heartedly. But it took a lot of peeling away and like putting pieces together. And like that was really painful, because I had to really face my past. I had to face why I showed up in the world how I did, why I showed up in that relationship how I did, that probably contributed towards its ending. Not the full reason, but like, I could see myself in new ways. And I think um that really shook me, because it was like, oh my God, and so, I mean, I got super lucky. Most people don't have that kind of support, or that actively support, that quickly and that frequent. Um, I'd probably be the most important person who's ever played a role in my life, to this day. I mean, my parents are special. I would say like right up there with them. So, that's kind of been my journey. And I think it's completely influenced how I found my path or created my own arc, and made me a lot more equipped, right, as a business leader, to enable that for other people, right? And it's like, how can I sell a vision to clients, um, about them having a unique arc or whatever, if I haven't taken that journey on fully myself? And while that journey never ends, I mean, I've started it, and I think bravely walked it and shared it, in a way that hopefully has helped others. Yeah. So yeah, it's a loaded question. Was it has been I would say I'm still on the spiritual journey. Always hopefully will be, until I'm out of here.
Yeah, I think every successful person has had a spiritual journey at some point. And you mentioned about everything looking, I know that I had that experience too, where it's like, yeah, everything's good. This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. I'm in my mid-20s. I worked my butt off. I've gotten here, da 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 da. And then it falls apart, and you're like, well, what do I do now? And it's at that moment that you start to, ask yourself questions like, who am I? Why am I here? What do I even have to offer? Those are the
Mhm.
questions I asked myself. And then it was that journey of, and then like you mentioned about your arc, and you're always building your arc. I imagine like an arc. And, when you're, how old are you?
29.
29. So, 29, it's like there's an arc, right? And then as you get older and older, that arc just continues to stretch out. And maybe there's, it's like just expands. And I noticed that for myself too, because then I was like, okay, I've had my transformational moment, and my season in life and so forth. And okay, now we're on the path. And then I had another experience, and it's like, oh wow. So I got to experience in business and finance and relationships and health and all the things, and so, and you mentioned a word earlier, and I think that's really important, is it was a gift. It was a
Yeah.
gift. It was a blessing. It wasn't even something that I needed to, there wasn't anything to really even forgive. I got to that point where I realized there's nothing to forgive. I'm actually grateful. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for that opportunity, because I'm not saying thank you to, for people who have been in abuse and so forth, but it's like it gives us an opportunity to dig deep into, to know, find out who we really are
Yeah, and
and what
totally.
we're capable of.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I would say like it's easier said than done, and it takes a while to get there because you go through a lot of anger and you go through a lot of frustration or a lot of like moments of validation, and those sometimes those never leave you, or the always trying to prove yourself, or externally like be like you always you carry these DNA kind of these formative moments on that road that are always with you. But I think you're right. Like, and I know you're right. If you can really find the silver linings truly, and like use moments and find the gifts within, um, I think it makes navigating kind of any obstacle, you have a lot more emotional resilience around it.
Yeah, for sure. And the whole blessing about having a mentor, oh my gosh, that's a podcast in itself, talking about the value of having someone who will invest and give back or pay it forward, investing in your life. It's just so, so powerful. So I do want to share before we wrap up, because I promised it earlier. And so we want to deliver on that, is talking about the publishing industry
Yeah,
and how you see it right now and where you feel like it needs to change, and or where you're really making those changes.
yeah. I mean, we could talk about this a long time. I mean, look, I have a lot of hard views on the industry at large. I think traditional publishing is very much for the ivory tower and for the select few. And by the way, I know a lot of people have been traditionally published, and like that's probably a result of my own privilege in and of itself. Um, but I also care about the common man or woman and them having a voice and an expression enabled for the masses much more than I do for the next professor kind of doing research to have another book. By the way, like those are some of our clients, but I think it's so much more than that. And like them being clients enables us to create the systems that will help every person do that one day. So grateful for that. But I think traditional publishing it's 200-year-old industry that really hasn't changed a lot. And it's gotten only bigger and slower and favors even the few actually, like it's like VCs, venture capital, like even VC firms, like they may make 10 investments a year, but there's probably only one or two they really pay attention to. And again, that's not every VC, because like I know a lot of great VCs, but I think the industries are very comparable. So I think traditional publishing is definitely going to die in the next 30, 40 years unless it goes through a major reinvention. I think hybrid publishing is actually a band-aid. This is a pretty aggressive point of view, which I'm going to share soon. I think hybrid publishing is a band-aid to traditional publishing, because then it puts the onus on the person writing the book to pay. It may make distribution easier, but now you have to pay. But you don't like you then okay, you have to pay, but you don't really have a journey set up for you. You don't have an education around how to make that sustainable. So then you might go be out 100K in expenses by the time the book's over, the marketing thing, and then you're like, well, what did this all add up to anyways? And so are hybrid publishers enabling the education of their authors in a way that's not just for a short-term book launch, like that's fine, but to me that's like flash in the pan, right? And then I think even Amazon KDP, like sure, it makes it look much easier to self-publish, but it's not like it, sure, that's amazing, it's out there, and by the way, we use it for some of our authors until we can build our own publishing line. But just because you can have Amazon KDP, while it may make it easier to publish, doesn't necessarily guarantee you any more of a success. It just says I can put a book on Amazon. And I think the big gap of what's missing is the solution to what we're building. We're creating an end-to-end operational machinery for right now, but fortunately, the select few to go down this journey, maybe the top 5% of income earners globally, to have a voice, to have a message, stand up all these pieces, right? But we're building the systems and the frameworks to publish books, to build thought leadership platforms, to have a message. And by putting all this brute force machinery in place, which has taken 4 years, and we still have some more to go. We have speaking to build, we have PR to build. We're going to take those systems and we're going to take them downstream, and we're going to enable that journey for hopefully millions of people to do. because I believe everyone should understand who they are, have a message, and the creator economy is only going to get bigger, and we need to adapt it. And the technology is only going to make that easier for us. And so I actually think we're sitting on a massive opportunity that we're only going to push further down a mountain or push up a mountain, because I truly believe like what's in front of us, it's not been unlocked. And so I think publishing PR, I think PR is actually broken too. Like, okay, you publish a book, you need to go pay $5,000-$10,000 to get pitched at these outlets. Like, okay, that's short term, like over 3, 5, 6 months. But then, okay,
And
like
for what?
what's the net payoff besides some like elitist signals that like you're doing well, when like in reality you may not be doing well at all. Again,
Yeah.
that's very comparable to startups. You could be a funded startup for millions of dollars, get a bunch of press, have no idea you're going to make money. And like, by the way, like some of the best companies in the world started like that. But at the same time, like the few that have succeeded are not, it's not the common story for most.
Yeah.
And so what we need to see is, I think, a much more repeatable way to go out and do this, sustain it at a price point that makes sense. And there's no solution like that on the market. And like, that's my vision, that I think would hopefully change society.
Yeah. One of your clients, and now somebody that works with you, is Nir Eyal, and he was actually a guest on our show in episode 298 in December of 2019. And plug for Nir, he's amazing. Wrote a book called Indistractable, and excellent episode, one of my favorites actually. And I didn't know he was working with you on that and the launch of that. So, as an example, of what you've been able to do with Near and be able to, it was actually very impressive. Like you shared with me a couple of case studies, and I really appreciate the measurements on that, because I have had clients come to me, prospects, that have become clients that have come to me that have spent $150,000 to get a book launched and had no sales,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of books being given out and no sales and no pathway, nothing in terms of taking that book and using it as a tool to grow a speaking business or a coaching business or anything. So that's why she came to me, and she was like, I don't want to spend any more money on this, but at the same time, I kind of have to, in order to, or I need to get some kind of answer. Otherwise, I just wasted all that money and I have this nice book that's going to sit on my shelf and, I get passed to my kids and that's it. So, it's a real thing. It happens, but I'd love for you to just use that example with Nir and kind of even bring it to today, how he's working with
Yeah.
you.
I mean, look, I want to like preface this by saying like Nir's a unique case. I mean, not a unique case, but like I wish every client was like Nir. Nir's one of the hardest workers. He understands what it takes to succeed in one of the toughest environments, let's say in Silicon Valley. Not this place where I am is so much more special, but I think it requires a level of work ethic to succeed here, in a unique way. I think he is one of the most consistent people I've ever met, and he's always willing to learn and grow. And so we work really well with those kinds of people. And just because you have money and maybe had success on paper does not mean like you have those intangibles that say Nir has. So like I want to preface it by saying like we've had a lot of success working with Nir. Nir's been a long-term client. He's come on our board of advisors. He's helped us shape our product and our service line from day one. And probably Nir is one of the greatest gifts of our business, not only as a client, but as a partner, as a leader, as a mentor. I feel indebted to Nir. He's done so much for us, and as we have done for him, ideally. So I just want to say, we've been to be able to guide Nir, to help him shape his voice, put it into the world, to impact people like you, develop new ideas and topics, future book ideas, have his own arc. There's few things that are more meaningful. And it's nice to work with people like him because he brings it day in and day out. He's probably more relentless than he was 4 years ago when we first started working with him. I love that. He's always pushing. And so yeah, near success, we've helped him do a lot of the things with his brand. He also has an amazing wife who runs a lot of his back end on his site and like the SEO and the ads and certain things like that. She's really technical and amazing. So, it's a full court press, and we've played a major part in it. But Nir's shown up, to all the podcasts. He's shown up to all the speaking opportunities. He's done all the things, the little things that create a wave. And if we're helping create the waves, working with people who also want to show up and with that same level of discipline, as we build that machinery for them across the board, I mean, that's what it takes to be that successful.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really great point, is that even though, yeah, he's a unique case, but those are skills, those are qualities, I should say, that anyone can develop. And so if they develop those, if they apply those, have that discipline, then you can be that, the fuel behind it to get it out there. Otherwise, all the work that you do is not going to help. So it is a team effort. It's a partnership. So I love that. So, well, Bryan, thank you so much. I appreciate it. There's so much more that we could talk about. I know that you have a wealth of resources and knowledge, and we're going to make sure that there's links to in the show notes so we can connect with you. For those that want to go right now, you can go to arcbound.com and find out a little bit more about what they're doing. And if you're a thought leader or aspiring thought leader and you want some help with your ARC story and figuring out how do you hone all of this passion and ideas that you have and the desire to make a difference in the world, and you want to hone in and focus that and be able to create an engine around it to be able to get it out to the world and do it in a sustainable way. Sustainable, there's a lot to that, right? It's lasting, and there's a lot to it. But so it's doing it in a sustainable way, so it's not just a quick hit or anything like that. It's long-term impact. Then I encourage you to go to Bryan's website, arcbound.com, and check in with him. And I always say, leaders of transformation take action. You can listen to podcasts all day long, and it's great. You learn lots of information, but bottom line, where the rubber meets the road, is when you take action, you do something about it, what you learned. And so I encourage you to do that today. Take action with something that you heard today, even if it is looking at it and saying, what is my story? Take that 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 years that you've lived on this planet, and start to look at it, can take consideration into, like, what are the life experiences that you've had. Maybe it's diving in, maybe those areas that you're afraid to go into, maybe it's exploring those, revisiting those areas, rather than, like, as Bryan said, putting patches or what was it, performance tape around those wounds. It's really revisiting those, because there's gifts in there, there's gems in there. Your pain so often is where your purpose is birthed out of. So I encourage you to do that. We'd love to hear your story. So you can go on leadersoftransformation.com. You can find us on social and reach out to us. We'd love to hear how this has impacted you and what you're doing in the world to make a greater impact. And if there's anything we can do to help you, let us know. Certainly, as Bryan mentioned, I'm also a coach. So if there's anything that I can do to help you in becoming a better leader, making a greater impact in the world from that perspective, we'd be happy to have a conversation about that. Till next time, have a great day, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the Leaders of Transformation again real soon.